on and bring on our next speaker. Jagadeesh is most recently our convener for TiECon 2014, which many of you might have heard was the biggest TiECon we ever had. And it was a wild success beyond anybody's dreams. And thanks to Vivi's leadership, we were able to accomplish a lot. Vivi is a highly successful entrepreneur, was the founding member of Exodus, which was a very large success, and then went on to create other companies, got acquired by Citrix, and then he runs Kaj Ventures. He's very deeply involved in development in India, as well as mentoring entrepreneurs, both in India and here. And I'm going to let Vivi take it over and share more about his thoughts on not just what he has done, but also on strategy and positioning and what it takes to create that leadership position using strategic thinking. Thank you, Vivi. Please go on.
Thank you, Ramesh.
Good morning. You all have come from India. So this is a 5-day educational tour and learning and teaching others, right? I just went through this morning some of the companies that you guys are building and the innovation. It is unbelievable. I mean, if every one of you succeed, I have no doubt that you guys are going to put India on the map as regards to innovation and applicability of these technologies to solving major mankind issues. That is pretty remarkable. And it's fascinating, actually, because some of them, I think, are truly addressing the current challenges that India is facing, related to waste management, related to cancer, all of that. It's very, very impressive, very impressive. Yeah, I would actually love to learn more and perhaps maybe see if I can get involved with a couple of these companies. Because personally myself, outside of the entrepreneurship, which we'll talk a lot more about, I'm also involved both on the healthcare side as well as on the education side from a social entrepreneurship perspective. So there is a bunch of hospitals that we have supported more on the social entrepreneurship, which basically uses the model of 80-20. So one is an eye hospital, which essentially does 80% for the underprivileged people, the cataract surgery, by charging 20% of the people. And there is another cancer hospital that has just come up in Bangalore, where the model is they charge 80% of the people to support 20% of the underprivileged, because cancer is moving at such a rapid pace, right? And it's amazing, actually, to see the need for these kind of solutions. And so I would absolutely love to learn more. So I guess today we wanted to talk more about the strategy kind of issues. And let me just give you a little bit of my own background and some of the companies that we did, and quickly the ups and downs and some of these strategic shifts that we made, which is very common when you are actually building a company. I mean, I can almost take, every company that I'm involved with, and I can start plotting, right? You will start seeing a lot of commonalities. Right from the time you conceive an idea to the time how the company progresses and what kind of changes that happens right during the life cycle of the company before you start to see the hyper growth kind of issue. So the first 3 to 4 years is the most challenging part. Right, that is when you have no idea whether your idea, whether your company, whether the market acceptance, right, whether it's going to succeed or not going to succeed. You have no idea. I mean, that's the whole fun of building startup companies, right? Because when you work in a big company, a lot of these things are already defined. If, let's say, I were to join Cisco, even 10 years ago, Everything was defined. The first set of products were defined, markets were defined, customers were defined, revenues were defined, margins were defined, profitability is defined, right? Everything is defined. But imagine the same Cisco when they started back in 87, 88, right? No one actually knew what a router really meant. I mean, I used to work for a company called Bridge Communications, which was one of the very first pioneers in the networking field. And Cisco, which produced this router software from Stanford University, which you guys are going to visit on Friday, and it came out of the Stanford IT labs, right, the routing technology. And they had no idea of actually translating that into a real company. So they first went to Bridge Communications. They went to the founders of Bridge Communications, and they basically said, hey, you already have an appliance. Take our software and we'll make it work on your appliance. It's a perfect appliance for us. And all of a sudden, from a bridge, which is a non-scalable kind of an appliance for networks, right? When you're connecting one network to another network to another network, you need these boxes. So bridges were the first type of boxes that connected these networks. And Cisco came along and said, this is not scalable model. I mean, it was known it was not going to be scalable, right? So the bridge guys were trying to put fixes in making that technology scale. Cisco came and said, not Cisco, this Stanford, these guys, right, came and said, here's a software that actually can change the whole behavior of how networking can be. So bridge guys, I mean, it's not like they're dumb guys, right? They're really smart guys. They founded a very successful company, one of the hottest companies in mid-80s in the Bay Area. Very, very smart guys. And most of them were from Stanford as well. They just rejected the idea. They said, this is not going to go anywhere, right? Then they went to IBM. IBM had these token ring networking products. And Cisco said, hey, I'll put it on your box, right? This becomes a router. IBM said, nah, we don't want to deal with it. So that's what actually led to Cisco, the founder, saying, man, nobody wants to take our software. Let's go build it ourselves. So that's what actually led to the building of Cisco, right? It's pretty fascinating how even the most strategic thinkers actually miss out on strategic decisions at the right time, right? Because your mind is focused on one thing and you think that is the biggest thing. And that's what actually determines the success and failure of companies. If you go back, look at history, right, for the last 30 years, I've been here, and companies have come and gone. The ones who have survived, there are only a handful of those companies. You can handpick these companies, right, that started in 60s and 70s that still exist. So the difference between that and the other companies that have gone under is because they missed out on some of these strategic decisions. So that's one part of it. The second part, there was a trend in the Valley until about 10 years ago to have sales-centric top management, especially a CEO, okay? So you talk to any VC back 10, 15 years ago, you have all these founders, 35% of them are Indian origin founders, mostly technologists, and they start a company, and the VC puts money in the company, and within no time, they bring a sales-centric CEO into the company. And a lot of companies actually went under during that process because a sales-centric CEO doesn't really understand, accepting the fact that if there is a product, once it is sold to a set of customers, And once the value proposition is done, then you have a sales guy who you ask him to go scale it, and he'll scale it. So if you look at the CEO of Cisco, which is John Chambers, is a sales guy. He came in once everything was proven, and he, in the last 17 years, was able to scale the sales and marketing aspect of it. But what is today's Cisco's problem? They don't have products. They don't have a product strategy to drive. Whereas you look at Google, you look at Apple, right? The main strategy that is changing is the product-centric strategy, right? So everybody now is realizing the importance of product-centric. So if you look at Google, right, 4 years ago, Larry Page came back, who's a very product-centric guy, and you look at where Google is today compared to where it was 4 or 5 years ago. So there is a lot of this shift that's going on in the industry, and it's becoming more and more and more evident that product and technology centric is more important from a long-term sustainability perspective. So if you look at even Intel, the reason why they have survived and why they have continued to do well is because they have rolled out product after product for the new markets, excepting they missed out big time on mobile, right? Big time they missed out because when the previous CEO, Ottolini, when he took the plan to the management team of designing these chips for mobile devices. And apparently at that time, all the factories of Intel were running absolutely full. There was no space, right, to take on new products. And the CFO looked at these mobile chips, which cost a lot less, and that means the margins are going to come down. And he said, you guys must be out of your minds to take on something like this, right? Where is the money for this? I mean, we have all of our plants running 100% full, right? Why would you take on a very, very low margin product that's going to sink the company? So the CFO argued from his perspective, and there was nobody else to counter-argue, and they made the decision not to go with mobile devices. If you look at today, 5 years from when that decision was taken, that's probably the biggest mistake that Intel has made. In fact, that is one sole decision that can literally bring the company down. They're trying so hard right now to get back into that market. Okay, so these are all strategic things that companies and the team need to keep thinking about. So let's look at the overall picture, and I'll just give you a little bit of my background, as I said, right? So I came here in 1982. It's exactly 32 years ago is when I came, and I worked for a bunch of networking kind of companies like that, Bridge Communications and so on and so forth. And then I always had a dream to start my own company, right? And I partnered with another friend of mine who became my friend here. Actually, he was not a friend from back home. I partnered with him, and both of us started this Exodus Communications. And when we started, it was one idea. And then over the next 2 years, right, as we were discovering ourselves and as the market opportunity opened up, in 2 years, we changed the position of whatever we were doing back then into Internet Data Centers company. And with that positioning, with a bunch of customers, we got the first round of funding, and we took the money, and we were the first company to even visualize that you need a classy internet data centers, right? It's not just the space aspect of it, but it is a high quality space, network with very high reliability of network, and all the things associated with the data centers, and make it easier for the then customers, right? Because internet was a new terminology at that time. So how do you make your life easier connecting to the internet, right? All of that as a package is what we offered as a product service. We didn't offer as a consulting time and material service. We actually offered it as a product service. We productized the services. So there were many disruptions that we had are introduced at that time, starting from the product and in the business model, all of that was very disruptive, is what we brought to the table. And exactly at the same time, the internet movement was happening. That's what resulted in zillions of these .com companies that were born, the first generation of the e-commerce companies, the Hotmails of the world, right? The Yahoo Mail. I mean, Yahoo actually acquired a company that was our customer. And the first generation of search engines. This is even before Google, which actually became our customer in 99, 2000. There were 6 other search engine companies between 96 and 2000, right? So we became the home for all of those, which is what actually led Exodus to take off. And we took the company public in 1998. And as we entered into the enterprise market, so many of the customers started to ask, who these founders are, what kind of background they have, what kind of experience they have. Can I take my crown jewel servers and move it into somebody else's data centers, which is Exodus data centers, right? So that is when we had to bring an outsider who was a veteran from IBM for about 29, 30 years. We brought her as the CEO. This is post-IPO, post-Exodus IPO. And then both of us actually left by the middle of 2000. And unfortunately, the company got stuck with some financial issues in 2001, 2002, so went through other issues. So I then went on to do another company called Netscaler, and my partner, Chandra, is actually doing another company called Jamcracker, which he's still running. He's the CEO of that company. And Netscaler was actually born to solve the internet growth issues, right? When the internet was growing at an exponential pace, you needed technologies that would actually enable the internet to scale in a more normal way rather than this hyper growth manner, right? So we had some unbelievable innovation to reduce the number of servers. So in order to think of, for example, if I needed 100 servers for 1 million users, right? For every 1 million users that I add, I have to add 100 servers. With the Netscaler technology, the same million users, I only need like 10 servers. Very disruptive, 10:1 kind of thing. But those of you who may know the post.com crash in 2000, 2001, okay? And here's this technology that we had. And I'm like pitching to various customers. In fact, I still remember very well. I went to the chief technology officer of Charles Schwab, and I pitched our solution, talking about how we can reduce from 100 servers to 10 servers using this technology, right? So the guy looked at me and he pulled out a chart of his traffic pattern, right? The number of users, the number of transactions, right? And the amount of demand that these users were creating in 2000, and what the projections were based on the demand. I mean, right, how this planning works. Based on the demand in 2000, right? So the projections for 2001 and 2002, which was like this. So he, as a CTO for the operations, he had to scale up his infrastructure to take on this demand, right? So he had obviously bought thousands and thousands of servers to accommodate this hypergrowth. And in the meantime, the market basically tanked, right? So he showed me this graph of the expectation of the number of users in 2002, 2003, and when the market crashed in 2001, literally it fell off the cliff. But he has already built the infrastructure for 2002, 2003. So he looks at me and says, Mr. Jagadeesh, I've already built the infrastructure for this 2001, 2002 demand, right? I've already piled up thousands of servers. And this is my traffic right now. So what am I going to do with your technology, reducing the number of servers? In fact, if you have a way of actually taking some of our servers and maybe even get me 10 cents on a dollar, I'll take it, right? So such was the situation. Now what do? So we went to our investors. Luckily we had another $25 million in the bank. So we went to the investors and said, listen, this is what the situation is. And if you want, we can return the money back, right? 50 cents or whatever, 70 cents on a dollar. So we'll just shut the company, or give us a month's time. And we know the value of this technology. Give us a month's time. We'll come back with you as to what we'll do with this technology. So they say, hey, we have already invested. We trust you guys. So come back, give us a proposal. So a month and a half later, we went back with 3 different proposals, what we can do with that technology. And everybody aligned to what the NetScaler is today, which is a $1 billion business, right, with Citrix. And that's what we said, this is what we're going to build. We re-strategized, we made the necessary changes to the product, and we reintroduced the product a year later. And that's the flagship product. And that product actually started to take off. And in 2005, we got an offer from Citrix for about $325 million. And all my engineers who had joined NetScaler back in 98, 99, they had never seen any wealth that the entire valley was talking about. Because in 98, 99, 2000, right, every company did so well. Most employees did they took home a huge amount of wealth. So I kind of felt bad that it's like 7, 8 years for these guys. And had we continued on our own path, it would have easily taken another 2.5 years before we went public. And the risk associated with it, and the further dilution associated with it, right? So this is a good offer. We decided, okay, we'll take the offer. I mean, economically or financially, it was probably one of the best decisions. But if you ask me today, would I do that? In fact, I tell all my companies that if you are growing at $16, $20 million, that's what we were. We were about $16 to $18 million a quarter, and we were growing, right? Which is like run rate of $65, $70 million. And what I advise to all my companies, if you get to that stage, don't even encourage taking any offers, right? If you're growing, if the market is healthy, continue to build. Take the company public. Right? Because when you are going through that phase, like all of you guys, right? If you hit it off, it's not easy to recreate that with another company. It's not easy because so many things need to come together. It's the people, it's the solution that you have created, the problem that you are solving, right? And the market itself. Adoption of all of these things. It's not that easy for things to come together. So if you have hit it, try to go all the way. Try to build that into a company because you want to create lasting companies. Okay? And only entrepreneurs can do that. Only entrepreneurs can do that. So today, luckily, I stayed back with Citrix for a couple more years after the acquisition. And today, it's almost like $1 billion in revenues. Right, the NetScaler product. So personally, there's a huge sense of satisfaction of having built the product, and the satisfaction we have is this product is now useful, right, to the entire data center community or the enterprise community solving the problem. So that's what I think you need to be thinking, right, from your perspective. The problem that you are solving, if it translates into a success, how can you turn that into a bigger entity? Okay, so and create lasting solutions. So during this process, right, if you look at changes that happens at different stages, and I bet you every one of you will encounter this. every one of you will encounter. There is some shift that happens, whether it is the market itself is not ready to take the product as is. So some shift you will have to do. Or there is a possibility that you are ahead of the curve. The market is probably like 2 years behind. So you have to pull the market. And how do you survive during that time when you're pulling the market? Okay, what are you going to do from a financial perspective? What are you going to do with your existing, keeping your employees, the morale high? How do you do all that? Those are the challenges as you're building the company. It's easy, I can stand here and I can tell the story of successes, okay? But behind that success, you literally, I mean, in both my companies, I was this close in shutting down both the companies. Both the companies were like this close, like 1-2 weeks away from shutting down, right? And, we somehow managed to turn around these things. And it's the commitment of the founders. Ultimately, only founders can do this. By the way, I funded several companies after that with all these MBAs from Wharton and Harvard and all that. And I'll tell you, when crisis hits, they're the first ones to run, because they will not take a pay cut. If I'm getting $250,000, I'll do this. Otherwise, I'm out. Because their interest, is always, how do I make that $250,000, $300,000 salary, right? They cannot even visualize not working for no salary. They cannot even visualize, right? So I don't know if there are any MBAs here. I mean, I'm hoping that even if you have MBA, I'm hoping you have the technology and product background. I don't have anything against, but let me tell you, I will never fund a company that only has MBAs. I'll never fund. In fact, many of the VCs now, they're very, very rigid. I mean, you go talk to Andreessen Horowitz. If there is a founder who's a pure MBA type of a guy, they'll just throw you out because they think it's a waste of paying that person the salary. I mean, what's his contribution going to be? The most important people in the beginning of the company is the guys who know how to build products, right? Can you come up with technology? Can you solve that technology, problem, and turn that into a viable product that whoever your customers are would use it, right? That's how they look at it. Because MBA, you'll start putting all the presentations and financial modeling, and who cares, right? Yeah, it is needed, but all these things are just going to change. So, in fact, are there any VCs in India? From India? No. Many of the VCs in India, by the way, I've told this to many of the VCs there also. Many of the VCs in India, this is another challenge, right? Because most of them have come from financial background. So what do? They look at your spreadsheet, right? You're trying to form a company, with this idea you're pitching, man, this is going to change the world. So this guy is asking, so what would be your revenue in the 3rd year? What would be your revenue in the 5th year, right? How do I know? Right? I'm an entrepreneur, I'm pitching this business plan to a venture capitalist early on, right? How do you project this, right? My goal right now is to build this product and get some beta customers, and I know the market is big if it takes off, right? So that's why thinking through, all of these product-related, product-centric. And I'm sure India will change. I'm so happy actually to see the kind of work, right, that you guys are doing. But let me tell you, don't make an assumption that the plan that you have built day one is going to be the final plan. It will not be. It will change. Be prepared for that, right? And the changes, and you have to be smart enough to listen to the market, to listen to customers, to listen to, your employees, right? Constantly. And how do you keep changing? It can be as simple as changing the messages, right? Or it can be as complex as even taking the same thing and repositioning it, right? How do you position the product? So I'll give you an example. When we did Netscaler is a load balancing company. So we thought we have built this is after the first product, which was not very useful to the market at that time, right? We re-engineered the product. So we reintroduced the product as a next generation of a load balancing product, which was competing head-on against Cisco and F5. And both were, obviously, Cisco is the leader in the market, and F5 had over $1 billion market cap, right, with almost $300 million in revenues. So we go head-on against these guys. In fact, we even put an ad in the magazines. If you want your website to be slow, then call Cisco or F5. Otherwise, call us. Honestly, I mean, this is how we put the ad, right? It was like blasting to F5 and Cisco and saying that we are solving this performance issues. But we actually took the product to the market. Customer said, so the number one issue was, I already have an F5 and Cisco. I don't need yet another load balancer. So no, we can give you better performance. We can do this. We can do security, blah, blah, blah. No, but I'm not interested in replacing my existing load balancers. So wherever we go, this is the adoption challenge that we started to face. Then we went back to the drawing board and said, hey, this is not right. So we then decided it's the same software. We created 2 different licenses. And we just brought the performance and the security issue as one software license, and the whole thing as another license. Then we went back to the customer, and then we proved it in the lab that we can coexist with an F5 and a Cisco. And we went back to the customer saying that, Mr. Customer, you buy our product, we'll work with a Cisco or an F5, and it will give you security that Cisco is not giving or F5 is not giving, and it will give you the performance that Cisco and F5 are not giving. So, oh, really? Oh, you can coexist. I said, yeah, we can sit on top of your Cisco boxes. That's fine. So they deployed us, and it worked, and it did what it's meant to do. And so we had all kinds of hooks that in the event something goes wrong with us, right, we just go back to Cisco. So believe it or not, 6 months after using our product, the same customer started to come to us saying that, hey, you know what? We've been asking Cisco for all these additional features, and they never paid attention to us. And you guys are saying, you guys do the load balancing also, right? Can you do these things for us? I said, yeah, I mean, if it makes sense, then we'll do it, right? So we did it. And in 6 months to 1 year, they started to say, I'm actually my 3-year, what do you call that? Depreciation, right, is over. 3-year depreciation is over. So I'm actually ready to replace these Cisco and F5 boxes. Perhaps maybe I can use your product. So the same customer who was telling us 6 months, a year before, that he did not want to replace a Cisco or an F5 was ready to replace our product, because by then he got used to our product. He liked what we were doing. He liked the people that he was dealing with, right? And now he was willing to give us more responsibility inside the data center. So things like this, right? How you quickly change the positioning and the marketing, the pricing, the sales strategy, right? Presentation, all of that, how you change is very critical. So keep these things in mind when you are pitching your solutions to the market. What is the market saying? So, in Silicon Valley, there is a very a hot company today. It's founded by a bunch of Indians. So the company is called Nutanix, and I'm an investor, and I'm on the advisory board of that company. This company has built storage solutions, right? And very disruptive storage solutions. So in fact, they just raised the next round, which was Series D or Series E or something like that, at $2 billion valuation. I mean, it's not a hyped company. This is a genuine company, right? They have revenues like $200 million or something like that. And that company, when they first came up with the product 3 years ago, go to customers and start pitching on their storage solutions, and customers look at it and said, you know, I like your technology. By the way, I was actually going to buy about $500,000 worth of NetApp or EMC, which is the storage companies, right? And perhaps maybe I can buy yours and then make it work with a NetApp or an EMC. And these guys say, you know what? My architecture actually does not allow my product to work with an existing solution. It cannot work with an EMC or a NetApp. Customers say, what? I have all these things, and now you're telling me that you don't coexist with a NetApp or EMC? So that was a big shock to this company. And architecturally, right, they had created a disruption in the architecture. And quickly, they had to go back and start looking at, so that means I cannot sell this product to the existing customer base, right, of NetApp and EMC, and try to fit my box into that environment. So I have to think something else. So what are the greenfield market opportunities? What are the new greenfield applications that are coming up? So they identified a couple of these absolutely like brand new. And to their luck, it turned out, I don't know how many of you have heard of this, VDI. VDI stands for Virtual Desktop. This virtual desktop became a new market about 2.5, 3 years ago. So they squarely went after that market. Total greenfield. And their pitch was very simple. They said, Mr. Customer, this is a new app that you're deploying. Do you know today how many users you're going to have, and a year from now how many users you're going to have, 2 years from now how many users you're going to have? They said, I know how many users I'm going to have today, but I don't know a year from now how many users would have adapted this, or 2 years from now how many. So what would you do with a NetApp if you were to go with a NetApp solution? Oh, I have to buy this $1 million NetApp. He said, what if I give you for $100,000, you just buy 5 of my boxes, right? Instead of $1 million investment in NetApp and another $200,000 in HP, scrap that, invest $100,000 in me. It's good enough. It's more than good enough for you, for your today's needs. And as your demand increases, you just keep adding 1 Nutanix at a time. Right? As your users scale from 1,000 users to 5,000 users to 10,000 users or 50,000 users, you just keep adding, because that's what the technology is. It's a disruption, right? Which is a distributed compute and storage. And boom, it just took off after that. And then once it took off, for this VDI application, people started to talk about the architecture. People started to talk about the uniqueness and the disruption of this technology. And now they'll say, I don't even need a NetApp, right? I don't mind actually deploying my, even previous applications on Nutanix boxes, right? That's where the market is heading towards. And so it's fascinating. So if you look at where you have to think from a strategic perspective, right? It could be product strategy. It could be sales strategy. It could be marketing, positioning. It could be even finance strategy, right? How you think from a funding perspective. And how you think to invest in your sales and marketing. There was a company that was born here in the Valley about 8 years ago. I'm not going to name that company. Funded by some of the finest investors of Silicon Valley, finest investors. This company built an infrastructure product. The founders came from Juniper Network. Even before the product was ready, the CEO was a first-time CEO, and he got a COO or a president who was a sales guy from his company, Juniper. And this guy, all that he knows is how to build the sales teams. The product is not even ready. This guy had built 17 sales teams around the world. This company raised $170 million and eventually got acquired for less than $60 million by another infrastructure company. Right? So you can see, right? It's written very clearly why this company will not succeed. So managing your finances by taking right type of decisions, right? As a founder, as a CEO, you have to push back on everything. You have to really think through, right? If a sales guy comes and says, I want to add 2 sales teams, why? Explain to me, right? The guys that you have you made them productive? Are they super busy, busier than what they can handle? Show me the data. Everything you have to ask, including even I used to ask my VP engineering, how do you prove to me that the engineers that you have are working hard? How do you prove to me? Right? I just feel that your engineers are working at 60% capacity. And I'll tell you why. Right? I give my own reasons. You prove to me that your engineers are actually working 100%. Right? Before you ask for 10 other people that you want to add. So every one of these things. So that's why strategy and execution are 2 sides of the same coin. Right? You cannot just win only with strategy. You cannot win only with execution. So you have to tie both of them very closely. So I don't know if you guys have any questions. I'll be happy to answer any questions if there is enough time.
One question.
One thing to understand is that when you said that sometimes there's a change in the way we do sales or anything, like there's a gap between you convince your customer and the real money flows in. In India, we typically find it very difficult to, when you go with a new product, I'm into medical, you got to do, doesn't matter which hospital you're going to, it's an MNC hospital or yeah, exactly. They want it free. And then there is, you don't really can judge what is going to be the market for that product. It is very difficult to get because it's like pharma companies have kind of spoiled them there. They get everything free. So that's the reason with doctors or something. So what I'm looking at, my question was here is, how did you even sustain, like, as you said, you had to go and convince a customer and 6 months down the lane, he kind of finds the performance and he finds the value in it. So that 6 months to 1 year, I understand costs are flat here. It's not so in India. So how do you really do that? What would be a suggestion as such?
Yeah, so India is a little bit of a tougher market, I agree. But I think they will pay. Ultimately, they'll pay. If they see the value in the product, they will definitely pay. So this is where a little bit of planning from a financial side, right? If you are bringing out the product today, and you know that this could take 6 months or 12 months, you got to make sure that you have enough runway. By the way, this financial thing is very, very crucial because in the end, if you run out of money, right, even if you have the best product in your portfolio, it just doesn't mean anything. Because once you run out of money, you start losing employees. Right, you pretty much have to shut the company because alone you cannot do anything. You may be very passionate about your product and company, and you want to keep the company alive, right? But you got to manage your cash. And in fact, all my companies that I work with, right, I'm watching almost like 9-12 months before, watching how the revenues are flowing and how the expenses are. Then you start telling the CEO, how do you start controlling your expenses, right? So there's some people, they put this budget, They create the plan, and the spending is always according to the plan. But the revenue is not according to the plan. I mean, how can that be possible, right? So you have to watch. I mean, that's why it's important for you to have right kind of people on the board who track these things and ask you, right? And asking you is also asking the other execs in the company. So it becomes, you will not be the only guy fighting with your VP sales and VP marketing guys, right? You have the board also behind you asking those tough questions so that they know that I don't, me as a VP sales and marketing, I don't just come to you and then start squeezing you to get me the dollars and resources. So plan that accordingly. But in the end, somebody has to pay. If nobody is going to pay for it, right, then you don't have a business. You got to figure out where there is a market for that. For any product that you build, somebody has to pay for that, bottom line. Otherwise, there is no business. I mean, or you build Google kind of a business where you survive out of advertisements.